Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In the last session, we discussed important definitions. They are the definitions which really go into the strategic management process. Just to have a recap of these definitions, the strategic management process refers to the full set of commitments, decisions and actions required for a firm to achieve strategic competitiveness and earn above average returns. Some explanation further on the terms used. Strategic competitiveness is achieved when a firm successfully formulates and implements a value creating strategy. Then what is an above average return? An above average return occurs when a firm develops a strategy that competitors are not simultaneously implementing. It provides benefits which current and potential competitors are unable to duplicate. I gave you some examples in the last class on each of these. Okay. We took the example of a well known razor manufacturing company, that is Gillette. It has come out with its new product, that is the Mash 3. The Mash 3, according to the company, uses a triple blade technology, and this triple blade technology, which can be, according to the company, harsh on the beard and can in fact come down very harsh on even the toughest of beards. This technology, which the company has developed and brought out in the form of a product, the competitors are not able to duplicate. This is a value creating strategy for the company, and it has resulted in more than above average returns for Gillette. This product is still sustaining in the market with good success. So, the other definitions which we discussed are the risk. What is risk? Risk is an investor's uncertainty about the economic gains or losses that will result in from a particular investment. I gave you the example of an individual investor being attracted by many advertisements to invest in the IPO of several companies which are coming out with their new IPOs. The investor should understand that there is a risk element always involved, in spite of the companies maybe the long history of operations in the same field as well, because the future cannot be predicted with certainty. Then the next definition we discussed was average returns. Average returns refers to returns that are equal to those an investor expects to earn from other investments with a similar amount of risk. Suppose an investor invests his money in a bank, let us say a fixed deposit, and gets, let us say, about 7% interest. The risk that is involved in getting that 7% interest for the investor is almost negligible. Now, suppose a company wants the investor to invest his money in the company, even in the company fixed deposits, let us say, there also there is a certain amount of element of risk that is involved. Suppose for the ill luck or the misfortune of the investor, let us say the company is not able to perform according to expectations. First, it may not pay the interest on the fixed deposit. Second, it may so happen it may not be in a position to return the principals also regularly. This happened to a well known finance company in the country, which was promoted by a well known manufacturing company. The company that I am referring to is the CEAT Financial Services, which was promoted by this well known tire manufacturing company CEAT. So, the result is it was not able to pay its depositors not only the interest, but also the principal. In fact, it went to the arbitration courts, requested the courts to allow it to pay the deposits over a certain time period, say 5 years, 3 years to 5 years, and said we will repay the deposits over this 3 to 5 years period at 20%, 25% like that, all these things. So, in fact, many of the depositors who have deposited in this CEAT Financial Services still are getting these types of returns at this 20% or 15% as agreed to by the court and which has been accepted by the company. So, even now this is this brings you to the point that an investor would be interested in investing his money in the company provided he is assured of a higher return than a, let us say, a bank where minimal interest is, where he can get a reasonable rate of interest with minimal risk. Then we looked at the strategic flexibility. The strategic flexibility refers to set of capabilities used to respond to various demands and opportunities existing in a dynamic and uncertain competitive environment. This is what I am what you should appreciate in the present day context is that companies are operating in a highly dynamic environment. In fact, they are not very sure of the next quarter only what is going to happen. In this type of uncertainties, what are the companies trying to do? They are more relying on guidance. So, this guidance is the one which suggests to the companies the next quarter may be changing in this particular manner. What does this involve? It involves coping with uncertainty and the accompanying risks. What does it mean? Sometimes it may so happen to the ill luck of the company, things go wrong, and when it goes wrong, everything, the strategies misfire. When the strategies misfire, then the results are there for the discerning public, that is the performance of the company comes down. So, like our Indian cricket team which lost the first test against South Africa just now, concluded yesterday. Where did their strategy misfire? The strategy misfired because it relied on a new middle order, a new inexperienced middle order to replace its experienced middle order, and that was a very high price to pay. And second, it relied on a bowling attack which was proved to be ineffective in different tests earlier. So, again a bowling attack which could not really take the opposition wickets, and a middle order which could not sustain itself. The result is you had a team really coming down in 2 innings in 2 days. Okay. So, this is what is the risk of a wrong strategy. What do you mean by taking a wrong strategic decisions? With respect to organizations also, strategic decisions, as I mentioned to you, they are not taken day to day, that is, it is rare, you do not take them day after day, and the consequences of taking these strategic decisions are quite high, because you are committing the resources of the organization, a good amount of resources of the organization, and these strategic decisions also involve for the organization a sense of direction. What do you mean by that? That is, it can tell the next decision maker what is the type of decision that was taken, the strategic decision that was taken in that particular scenario, and what was the type of results which were obtained, and whether it is wise to take the same decision or a different decision now. Now, with all these inputs again, we go into this strategic management decision making process. Kindly look at this diagram. What does this diagram have? If you see this diagram is arranged in the form of blocks. Look at block number 1. This block number 1 stands for determination of mission or purpose. What do you mean by this? It means why did the organization come into being? Why should this organization be brought into existence at all? So, take the example of Indian telephone industries. This was the first public sector undertaking to be started by the independent Indian government. What was the purpose for which this organization was started? To fulfill the telecommunication needs of the country. So, this is the purpose. So, this organization was having this mission or purpose like to fulfill the telecommunication needs of the country. Come to block 2. What does this block 2 mean? It means environmental assessment, that is threats and opportunities. What do we understand by this? Environment means the business environment in which the organization is functioning. We are looking only at business environment, kindly keep that in your mind. So, the business environment in which the organization is functioning, what do we understand by the term threats? Threats refers to the number of competitors already in the existing business. Suppose in 1948, when this company Indian Telephone Industries was started, if you looked at this block environmental assessment, threats and opportunities, applied it to IT, how did it look like? Threats. How many companies were manufacturing this telecommunication equipment in the country immediately after independence? the answer that you would get is practically 0. That is, the company Indian Telephone Industries was in fact a monopoly player. It was entering a monopoly market. So, whatever it said was the last word in the telecommunication market in the country. Then what about these opportunities? The opportunities that presented for the telecommunication market was simply unimaginable, huge. So, without communication, you really do not have anything in the marketplace. Of course, this scenario has undergone a sea change as we have moved from 1948 to 2010. So, you have the mobile communication, you have the e-commerce, you have the e-business, all these are different forms of communication changes which have taken place due to technology changes. Now, come to the third block, that is organizational analysis, strengths and weaknesses. The organizational analysis, strengths and weaknesses, suppose we apply to a company like ITI again. What is the strength of ITI? At the point of its inception, the strength of ITI was its technical manpower. The technical manpower that was infused into ITI to come out with telecommunication products was its strength. At the time of inception, ITI had in fact sky as the limit for its operations and practically saw no weakness. Okay. So, it had a real blank check from the central government, that is the first Indian government, to start its operations the way it wants, and the government committed the resources. So, you had only full strengths for the company, a weakness which was almost 0. So, a company started with S and W was 0. Now, come to the 3 blocks put together, that is 1, 2 and 3. When you look at these 3 blocks together, what does it tell you? The organization is in the center, that is, it has been created for a purpose. You have a block 2 and you have a block 3. What does the block 2 tell you? The block 2 assesses the threats and opportunities. The block 3 looks at the strengths and weaknesses. So, in other words, the block 2 looks at the outside environment of the organization or the external environment for the organization. What does block 3 look at? The block 3 looks at the internal environment of the organization or within the organization. So, this block 2 and block 3 put together, what does it tell you? It comes out with what we call in strategic management the SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Now, these were the ones which came out of blocks 2 and 3 in our diagram. So, this is the example which I gave you in the first class to give you what does an Akshohini consist of. I will just keep that as such. Now, come back to this particular PowerPoint, the slide what we were discussing. So, if you see what is happening. So, we looked at block 2 and block 3. This block 2 and block 3 is the one which tells you about the threats and opportunities, then the strengths and weaknesses of an organization. We looked at, or we considered this using the example of ITI. Now, why do we do this? We want to do this to find out what should be the objectives of the organization. In other words, these 2 and 3 help to find out what should be the specification of objectives for the organization. Suppose it so happens that the specification of objectives require changes in the light of 2 and 3, then what do? We say redefine and revise as needed. Suppose we want to change this, then we say we redefine and revise these objectives as might be needed. What do you mean by as might be needed? This might be dictated by the dynamic business environment which is pervading at that particular point of time. So, you may change your objectives according to the dynamics of the environment. Similarly, this specification of objectives will help you to formulate the strategy or the strategic plan. Why are we formulating this strategy or strategic plan? It is to achieve the objectives and goals. Now, again, suppose the dynamic environment requires you to reformulate them, this block on the left tells you reformulate as needed. Okay. Then similarly, the block number 6 tells you after this strategic plan is formulated, implementation or execution of the strategic plan, in other words implement that strategic plan. So, in the implementation of the strategic plan itself, you may find so many bottlenecks, you may find so many hurdles in implementing the strategic plan. Some of them, some of the steps that you executed, you may find they are not really implementable in the actual context. Then what do? You have to rework your strategic plan. So, in other words, the strategic plan requires to be reworked. So, this is a block which gives you on the left side rework as needed. Now, come to the 7th block. The 7th block is as a result of all the foregoing blocks. What does it tell you? The implementation or the evaluation of the strategic plan also requires a very important component, that is you have to monitor that implementation, you have to review that implementation and you have to evaluate that implementation. Now, all this will help you to recycle to phases 1, 4, 5 and 6 as needed. In other words, you may come to a situation where the purpose of the organization itself you may like to redetermine as needed. So, this is something extraordinary when you look at it. So, a strategic decision making process may force the organization even to look at its purpose itself. Why did it come into being? Whether that purpose is the right one or whether it has to be reworked. So, all these 7 blocks put together along with the blocks on the left side where we say redefine, revise, reformulate, rework, recycle and then redetermine as needed for the mission or the purpose of the organization. All these form together what we call the strategic management decision making process. Just to give you in a very small nutshell, this strategic management decision making process has got 7 blocks. The most important crucial block in this is the 2 and 3, where we look at the evaluation of the threats and opportunities and also the analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. The threats and opportunities refer to the environment. This we normally refer to in strategic management as the SWOT analysis. The next 4 blocks which I mentioned to you is the specification of the objectives, the formulation of the strategy or the strategic plan, then the implementation or execution of the strategic plan, then the monitoring, review and evaluation, all put together forming the strategic management decision making process, along with these blocks on the left side, where you may require redefining or revising or reformulating or reworking or recycling or redetermining as needed. So, this is an important figure in strategic management, which you may like to go over again. Now, what is the main inference that you can draw from this figure? The main inference that you can draw from this figure is that this figure has been drawn using blocks. Now, suppose I wanted to draw the figure in a different manner, not using the blocks. What is the method by which I can draw or bring out this same strategic management decision making process in an organization otherwise? This is brought out to you in the next diagram. This is what is called the step and ladder approach. So, the step and ladder approach, you see several steps here, and you see when you go from the bottom, you look at it as a ladder. Okay. So, these are the steps and this is a ladder, and you have 3-4 compartments which are given to you, but basically the components of the compartments have not undergone any great drastic change compared to the block diagram that we discussed. Kindly note that. So, if you look at block number 1, you have environmental analysis, external, internal. External again refers to the opportunities and the threats, where some more insights are provided, that is social environment, then task environment. What do you mean by social environment? A social environment refers to the society in which the organization is functioning. An Indian organization functions in the Indian society. The society puts some obligations on the organization. So, the organization has to be aware of those obligations. It cannot be turning a blind eye to them. What could be an example for this? Take the working conditions for women in organizations. An organization has to provide certain facilities for its women employees. What is the types of facilities which an organization is expected to provide? It has to provide something like a creche, where the children of the women employees can be looked after when the employees are working in the organization or the factory or whatever it is. Then some additional facilities for their medical care, not only for the woman employee, for also for the children. These are tasks which are enjoined on the organization concerned. What is the task environment? Task environment is nothing but the business environment in which the organization functions. So, there it has to look at how many players are there in the market, what is the type of market in which it is functioning, whether it is a monopoly market or a oligopoly market or where is it, or a duopoly market. So, how does it really formulate its strategies? Internally, it has to look at the structure, the culture and the resources. What do you mean by culture? This is one aspect in which our country prides itself, that is, we have a culture which dates back to more than 5,000 years old. So, we have a certain respect for our elders. So, because of their age and experience, we have respect for women to be exhibited. So, all these things are to be followed or are to be shown in organizations also. In other words, you have to be a caring employer, not an uncaring employer. Okay. So, these are some things which organizations strive very hard to bring it into their work culture. So, this is what we call work culture. Now, come to the second block, that is the strategy formulation. Kindly note that we have the changes between the block diagram and this diagram are not really drastic. You have mission or the purpose for which the organization came into being. Then this leads to what is called objectives, in other words formulation of objectives. This leads to what is called the next stage, that is the strategies. That is, in order to achieve the objectives, you formulate strategies. In order to implement these strategies, you formulate policies. How do you implement these strategies? So, you formulate policies for them. So, you next enter to the implementation stage per se. When you come to the implementation stage per se, you draw up the programs for implementation of the strategy. So, in order to implement the strategies, you formulate policies, then you come to the implementation stage itself, where you have the programs for implementing the strategies. So, when you drop the programs for implementing the strategies, the next stage is budgets, that is committing the resources of the organization. So, this much of resources for the implementation of this strategy. Then the next step is the procedures. What do we mean by the procedures? How should actually this budget be made use of? What is the method of making use of the budget? An organization has got several procedures. We can say, so let us say you want to make a travel, let us say from place A to place B. You have a travel requisition to be made out, and depending on your eligibility, the organization may say you go by this mode of transport, whether it is the train, bus or the air, and then depending on your eligibility, the organization might also tell you, you are eligible to stay in this type of hotel or guest house, and this is the TA, that is a travel allowance eligible to which you are eligible, or and this is a daily allowance to which you are eligible. Make yourself comfortable with this daily allowance. This is the type of things. So, all this comes under procedures. Similarly, what could be another example of the procedure? Let us say your vendor supplies materials to an organization. When the materials are supplied to the organization takes the materials to stock, but it may like to check the quality of the materials before releasing the payment. Now, this method has undergone a lot of change. Take for example, the organization Myco, now known as Bosch. What is the type of changes that have undergone? Now, this company says the vendor is responsible for the quality of the product that is being supplied. It wants to absolve itself of the quality checks. So, it wants to tell the vendor, you are responsible for whatever you are supplying. Now, you may ask the question, what happens if the vendor is found wanting in quality? Then immediately that vendor will be blacklisted by the organization concerned. In other words, the onus is put on the vendor. So, the organization says, you do the quality check at your place 100%, and my production process should not in any way be affected by lack of quality or inferior quality of materials which you supply. Suppose it were to happen, then we are blacklisting you. So, blacklisting is what do you call a high dent which will be caused on the supplier organizations, and the supplier organizations are extremely careful on this note. Now, the next question is, okay, fine, you put this onus on the organizations which are supplying these materials, all right, but what does these vendor organizations get in return? Take the same example which I gave you. This organization, as soon as the vendor supplies this material 100 items, the item number 1 quantity supplied 100, the person immediately takes it to stock, one other person makes out the check, it will be in the present day circumstances electronically credited to the account of the vendor organization. So, that is the extraordinary speed with which remittances are taking place in organizations in the country. And what could be a better example than Bangalore, okay, where you have the hub of the IT industry, and you have top class manufacturing and other electronic industries also. Now, we come to the last block, that is the evaluation and control. The evaluation and control, what are we really looking at? We are looking at the performance of all these things which we did in blocks 2 and 3. That is, we formulated the strategy, we implemented the strategy. Now, we want to know what has been the performance. So, this is the last step. So, if you see these steps, if you go down, you are going in the form of steps: mission to objectives to strategies to policies to programs to budgets to procedures to performance. Now, below all this is running this bottom line, that is the feedback and control. This feedback and control is in fact applicable for all the blocks, that is, it is applicable for evaluation and control, it is applicable for implementation of strategy, it is applicable for strategy formulation, and it is also applicable for environmental analysis. What do we mean by this? It is also applicable for environmental analysis, because the environment is dynamic. Sometimes the steps that we took for assessing our internal environment, suppose it needs to be changed, all these things have to be brought out. So, this is the underlying block or the line which goes through all the blocks, that is a feedback and control. Together this forms again the strategic management process, brought out to you in the form of a step and ladder diagram. So, the previous diagram was bringing out the strategic management process in the form of blocks. The present diagram brings out the strategic management process in the form of steps and ladder. This is called the step and ladder approach to the strategic management process. Okay. We go further. What is the These are some terminologies which are coming in as we have progressed. So, as I mentioned to you in the first class, this term strategy was formally used by this gentleman Ansoff when he was working in this Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in the year 1965. So, for the first time in the country, that is in our country, we started implementing the corporate plan in 1974. The company which did this was the Bharat Heavy Electricals, that is BHEL. Now, over these 35 to 36 years, so many changes have taken place. That is, the corporate plan has given way to strategic management. The strategic management has come through different process stages. What I gave you was putting all these process stages in the form of two figures. The first figure in the form of blocks and the second figure in the form of step and ladder. I tried to present to you some examples from the live situation. Let us say we took the example of Indian Telephone Industries when it started down to the new organization, say the Bosch. How does it really, the types of changes that have taken place, and tried to explain the strategic management process. Now, what has resulted in all this, or what has resulted through all this? What has resulted through all this is the organization is also learning. That is, the organization is also learning through all these processes. It says, okay, we did this at this point of time, whether it is a right thing. Now, if it is not the right thing, how do we correct this? So, the present day organization, in order to be sustaining itself, has to be a learning organization. So, the present day organization has to be a learning organization. So, what are the characteristics or what are the features of this learning organization? What is the types of activities it is going to perform? So, this is what I am going to present to you in this slide. A learning organization performs 4 main activities. The first one is solving problems systematically. This is very important. Do not solve a problem in a haphazard manner. This is what we discussed when we were looking at the decisions in an organization, that is the strategic decisions. When we looked at those strategic decisions, we said, suppose we took those strategic decisions with care and we implemented them properly, it is likely to result in success. It resulted in success in the past, it is likely to result in success in the future. In other words, what does it mean? A systematic approach is likely to pay dividends. So, an organization should have a systematic approach, not a haphazard approach to solving problems. The second activity, it should not be averse with experimenting with new approaches. I give you a very simple example. If you really look at the country about some, say in the late 70s or the early 80s up to mid 80s, let us say, what were the 2 brands of cars which were there in the Indian market? The Indian market was exposed to 2 brands of cars. The first car was the Ambassador, the second car was the Fiat. So, of course, some name changes like Premier Padmini, all those things came there, but basically the ambassador and the fiat. Now, this ambassador and the fiat, if you really look at it, how did this ambassador and the fiat really work out in a family? If you see, you had the ambassador passed on from perhaps the grandfather to your father, from your father to you, then from you perhaps to your son, and say the family used to pride itself by saying, this is the car which was used by my great grandfather. Fine, but unfortunately, what is the negative point in this whole process? Over the years, the technology has changed to such an extraordinary extent, your good old ambassador has not been able to incorporate all those technologies in its new product line. Now, what does it mean? In other words, in a market which is dynamic, you should be prepared to give up sentimental values. So, you should be prepared to say, okay, this product is not working. So, if this product is not working, if this product is a failure in the marketplace, you should be prepared to discard that product or the product line. You should say, okay, for some reason we have not been able to come out well with this particular product. So, just give it up. In other words, the organization should be willing to experiment with new technologies, should be willing to experiment with new products, should be willing to experiment with new markets in order to assert itself in a marketplace. The third one is learning from their own past experiences and past history. What does that mean? When the organization introduced its products, it may so happen that it has gained certain amount of experience. So, when you, let us say, an automobile, you introduce it, a new model of the automobile, you introduce it into the market, the market might provide you with a lot of feedback saying that this model is having all these inadequacies. So, what is the type of example that you can think of? So, you have these electric charge vehicles. So, one of the market feedbacks which the market is giving to the company is that this charge is sustainable only for this many kilometers. Suppose I want to have a longer drive, this charge is not going to sustain. So, all these past experiences and past history should enable a company to come out with a winning product and a winning combination. It should also learn along with its past experience and past history the experiences of others. That is, some others have come out into the market earlier than you with products. Some of them are successful, some of them are not successful. Why were they successful and why this failed? All this should be brought out. The last one is what is called transferring knowledge quickly and efficiently. You have gained certain amount of knowledge throughout this exercise of making these products or product line. There is no point in keeping that knowledge only with you. This should be disseminated throughout the organization. This is what is called in the present day context the knowledge management, the knowledge sharing. So, this knowledge management, knowledge sharing is happening in different places, that is you may be in place X, but you may be sharing your knowledge experience or knowledge with a person in place Y. It may be in the same country or in a different country. You may be even sharing your knowledge in a virtual organization, that is the organization is really not existing in reality, but it is virtually existing. You want to find out what is going to happen. All these are called simulating organizational environment. So, this simulating organizational environment, it is the one which knowledge management has brought out in the present day context. So, a learning organization should be able to transfer the knowledge it gained from the different products or the product line experiments quickly and efficiently throughout the organization. So, you should not be holding back information. So, many times we used to wonder, or many times we have wondered, suppose all the knowledge that was there in our epics was transferred to the next generations. Maybe you would have the country would have brought out better defense equipment much ahead of the so called developed countries. So, this is in other words, not only an organization can be a learning organization, we can also have a learning country as well. So, we stop here for this particular session. So, just giving you back on the learning organization. Learning organization has got 4 main activities, that is solving problems systematically, experimenting with new approaches, learning from their own past experiences and past history, as well as from the experiences of others, and lastly transferring knowledge quickly and efficiently in the throughout the organization. Thank you.